part. So the moderator of this session will be Ibrahim Erden. Well, let me present. We will have John Dixon, Wind Europe CEO. Within 50 minutes, they will be also departing. For that reason, we will have from the Ateş Wind Power CEO, Mahmut Güldoğan, and we will have from Tersan Shipyard, Ahmet Paksu, Vice Chairman of the Board, will be here. Thank you so much. Well. So once again, let me repeat once again. We have Joss Dixon, CEO Wind Europe. Ibrahim Erden will be moderating the session. We have Ateş Wind Power for Mahmut Gündoğan, and we will have Osman Nurettin Ahmet Paksu from Tersan Shipyard, and we will have the international finance institution Sean Whittaker will be with us from Offshore Wind Lead. We will be talking about bridging markets, integrating Turkish industry into the European offshore wind supply chain, and we will be talking about the opportunities of collaboration. We will be talking about this supply chain integration. We will be beginning this session shortly. Without any breaks, we will be continuing without breaks. Let me share a few notes. We will be talking about the strategical position of Turkey and how we can have this also contributes the position of Turkey to their development. Distinguished moderator, the floor is yours. Let's start. Well, first of all,
moderating in Turkish, but for your questions, I'm going to switch for English. All right. Değerli Bakanımız,
distinguished ministers and distinguished participants, we would like to thank for their notes, for their messages and contributions. With the contributions of the business people, it was a really valuable session. We have also talked about the offshore facilities and projects. Energy Ministry and Ministry of Industry has also contributed a lot. So our Ministry of Transport has also a responsibility in this regard. We closely follow up. We also communicate our needs and needs of our industry. Today, our session is also regarding the international areas for those who are working in these areas. We have CEOs in our session. They will be sharing their knowledge, and their sharing their know-how is an honor for us. Let me briefly introduce our speakers. Briefly and rapidly, I will be directing my questions. First of all, within the scope of this Congress, in this session, it's an honor to be here with you. It's an honor to have these attendees and these speakers. We will be discussing our wind potential. We talked about the storage potential. We are discussing our industry. We are discussing the whole ecosystem. Of course, we shouldn't be leaving apart these offshore. How do we measure the offshore wind? And we will be talking about supply chain in Europe. In the supply chain in Europe, what are the recent developments? And within this supply chain, how can we integrate? These will be the topics. As you know, Turkey is in this market, it ranks in the 6th. But in terms of onshore wind, it is the 5th country. So Turkey has a great potential. We have a footprint. We have a great footprint. We have a great infrastructure. So how can we advance further? How can we facilitate the synergies? These will be the topics we will be delving deeper into. We started in 1990s. These onshore wind systems started with a concrete factory, and then we switched to steel, and we switched to blade manufacturing, and Yektan. With this domestic manufacturing support, we developed, starting from 2012, we followed these developments, and the number of the factories are also increasing. We are more than delighted to see that. What is the situation of now in 2022? We see that the two, according to our inventory, we have the 2.2 billion euros of industry. We're exporting more than 50 countries, and more than 50% has a diversification depending on the needs, domestic needs, and we sometimes export up to 70%, sometimes we export 45%. So our industry is exporting up to half of its production. It's not just depending, it shouldn't stay only onshore wind. We have Ateş Çelik, TPI, Çimtaş, we have Beyçelik. These are only for onshore. They shouldn't be manufacturing for only onshore wind energy. We should be also harnessing the offshore energies. When we take a look at the global markets, we have seen that 75,000 megawatts of installation is also increasing. It will not be staying as such. So we followed the tender in our country, the first tender, but it wasn't successful. When we take a look at the last 1.5 years, we have seen that our Ministry of Energy, these pre-engineering studies, they also realized these roadmap studies with the World Bank. The funds with the World Bank within the Marmara region, these are they define 3 regions. The assessment and also the project design processes are also ongoing. As the TWEA, we continue together our collaboration with the Ministry of Energy in order to advance these studies that was initiated by the World Bank. So we would like to we communicated the recent developments to our ministers with their permission, and with their support we will be generating reports and we will be presenting it to the industry. For that reason, Ministry of Industry, with the leadership our presidency, they declared the HIT 30 program. We talk about $30 billion of program. So a huge share is dedicated to onshore and offshore wind energy. It's really important that we use this share. In this regard, Turkey will receive these funds, these important supports, and it will accelerate. It will help a lot. It will be serving as a leverage in the integration of Turkey in the market. So to all the speakers, I would like to, in advance, thank for their valuable contributions and remarks in this context. First of all, I would like to give the floor to Giles Dixon and Sean Whittaker. Starting from Giles Dixon and Sean Whittaker. Giles. European wind industry is one of the highest representatives of this Wind Europe. He's the CEO of Wind Europe. We always consult this platform. First of all, I would like to ask him, Giles.
Is regarding Turkey's industrial capabilities and the needs of Europe and Europe's offshore targets. How do you see Turkey's industrial capabilities supporting Europe's offshore wind targets in parallel to the onshore integration between Turkey and Europe? And what are the specific areas you believe where Turkish manufacturers and service providers can add the most value?
Thank you, Ibrahim Bey. Turkey does a fantastic job providing equipment for onshore wind to the rest of Europe. Providing equipment for offshore wind requires new investments to produce different types of equipment, larger equipment. The blades are longer, the nacelles are bigger, the tower pieces are bigger. You also need to manufacture the foundations whether it's for the bottom-fixed offshore wind or the floating offshore wind. And the factories you have today producing equipment for onshore wind, as they stand today, they would need significant upgrading to do that, and you probably need additional factories on top of that. Fine, you can do that. Crucially, you've got the know-how in how to make blades, nacelles, towers. You know how to do it. The technology is the same, it's just bigger for offshore. And some of your factories you'll be able to expand. You will, of course, need the new factories for the foundations. My understanding is your focus is bottom-fixed offshore wind to begin with, but you've got the options of floating wind as well. For floating wind, across Europe as a whole, we do not yet know where and how exactly we're going to make those floating foundations, the floating structures. And maybe Turkey has something distinctive to contribute there. We do know we're going to need a lot of steel in those floating structures. And that may be very interesting for Turkey's steel industry.
Thank you very much. I mean, raising awareness about Turkish steel industry was, I believe, key, because that is also helping our shipbuilding industry to grow, not only our wind industry, which is supporting our industrial development there. So switching then to Mahmut Bey, and again Turkish. Mahmut Bey.
Mr. Mahmut. Mr. Mahmoud, first of all, in terms of European investors, we are one of the tower producers. On the other hand, we have this generator part, but as a tower producer, Ateş Çelik, Ateş Wind Power has preparations for the domestic market and for the outbound market. So regarding the potential, regarding the global markets, what type of gains can we have as Turkey? Thank you so much, distinguished moderator, distinguished president. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the whole organizing team for this valuable organizing. The motto of today is offshore. This is shedding light on offshore. What do we say? First of all, we say that this is the future of Turkey, and it is the energy of the future. There is one important point. I believe this is of critical importance. The technology of today. When we talk about the technology, we talk about the technology. This is the energy for the future. And for the future of Turkey, we have this energy. Just like Jazz says that we have to scale up. It is the sizes are different. But apart from that, the whole technologies are being produced within our factories for bottom-fixed turbines, for blades, for towers. Well, I will be delving deeper into these topics, but well, it is not risky at all. This investment is not risky at all. This is zero risk. If we talk about hydrogen, it is a risky area. We don't know where it's going to end up. Well, when we talk about electrical vehicles, even it is risky. When we talk about carbon reduction, but all the technologies regarding wind energy, we produce it, we manufacture it in our factories, we see it. They are concrete technologies. TPI, if they take a decision, they can produce offshore blades in a short period of time. Ateş and blade, they do it in other parts. They can immediately do it. In our industry, as a domestic representative of our industry, we want it to be manufactured in Turkey. It doesn't matter whether we do it or not. I believe we will be doing our part easily. I have no doubt. They can do the other equipments, other teams can do the tower, or we can collaborate on the manufacturing areas. If we proceed component by component, it's another topic, but maybe as a contribution. We have these this side industry regarding these equipments. They can manufacture using their existing equipments. For example, they can produce these tower internals. This factory doesn't need any more investment. They can realize this easily. Or a blade producer. They can also produce it right away. Only for the main component producers, they will be needing some physical investments. These physical investments, unfortunately, they will be costing millions of euros, as our vice minister pointed out. Maybe we have this concept of hit 30. Within the scope of hit 30, we can realize. Circling back to your question. Well, circling back to your question is Ateş wind power, Ateş steel, we will not be accepting that they should not be produced in Turkey. They will be manufactured in Turkey. Of course, our competitions are also our partners, our stakeholders. Our stakeholders know about this. We will be contributing to our competitions, our stakeholders. If there's a volatile economy in Turkey, we don't know what's going to happen next in Turkey. If they have doubt, we will be taking the responsibility. We will do our part. We will be designing foundation. We will be also designing and in the tower systems, in the generators, of course, in the offshore. This direct drive has more part in offshore. It is to the contrary to onshore. It has more needs for the maintenance. We have to invest and transfer the knowledge that we possess. So regarding the offshore, we see the feature. We see I don't want to call it opportunity. I would like to really refrain from this speech of opportunity challenge. No, this is the future as it is. Technologically, we are more than prepared. Technologically, we follow up our stakeholders. We are in contact with our stakeholders. We will do with or without our stakeholders, as Giles mentioned. I'll once again highlight, as our Vice Minister of Industry and Natural Resources mentioned, in terms of bottom fix, we can develop these projects easily, and we will be converting investments. In this regard, I'll be touching on the parts that IFC and World Bank had some projects. I realized some of this, so I will be going back to Sean Whittaker. So regarding the World Bank studies, would you like to share?
First, if you want to share any insights about what has been done with the Turkish Ministry of Energy by World Bank, your partner institution and bank, and about the financing part then. As we all know, financing is a significant entry barrier, not only for offshore, but also for many others. But for offshore, it's a huge burden on the investors' shoulders. So what financing mechanisms does IFC support that could facilitate Turkish companies' involvement in the European offshore wind industry? And how do you want to elaborate on that?
Sure. Thanks for the question, and thanks for inviting me to this session. So the World Bank, for the past 5 years, we have been working on the offshore wind development program, which is, we've worked with 24 countries around the world over the past 5 years on helping them to accelerate their uptake of offshore wind. And a lot of that work focuses initially on doing an assessment of their resource potential and then developing these roadmaps that essentially put together all the pieces of the puzzle that have to be in place in order for offshore wind to work. And I remember when we first published in 2019 our map of the technical potential for offshore wind in the Black Sea and in and around in Sea of Marmara. I think we were quite surprised at the remarkable potential that existed. And since then, we've been working with the government of Turkey on development of a roadmap that essentially maps out where offshore wind, what role it might be able to play in the country's energy future. And I'm happy to say that tomorrow we will be officially launching the roadmap. And thank you very much for your assistance in this process. You've been a great partner for us. So yeah, we are very really positive about what offshore wind, the role that it can play in Turkey. And it's not only from just a resource standpoint, but touching on supply chain. Turkey has a very well-developed onshore supply chain, and we've seen, as I like to say, we've seen this movie before, where you get countries that have an onshore developed supply chain, and then they migrate it towards offshore wind. And you have to be honest, though, it is tough. As Giles said, if you build a tower, doing it for an onshore machine, for a 4-megawatt machine, that's one thing. If you're doing that same tower for a 12-megawatt machine, that's a very different entity. It has to be built close to the shore, close to port. But it also has to be said at the same time, there's a great map that the Renewable UK published a few years ago that shows the offshore wind supply chain in the UK. And while it is true that around the ports you get a lot of activity, it's remarkable how much happens inland, and people forget, a wind turbine comprises some 4,000 parts.
Exactly.
And the big things like the towers and the nacelles and the hubs and the castings, those have to happen near ports. But a lot of the internals happen inside. They do not. They can be produced inshore and then shipped out to the ports. So the need for diversification of the supply chain is important. So we feel very optimistic for Turkey's prospects. In terms of the International Finance Corporation, which is the group that I represent, we are the private sector arm of the World Bank. So we finance private sector activities. And yeah, we are extremely optimistic about offshore wind. And we do investments in the wind supply chain. In the past, we have not done as many investments in the supply chain as we have in power production. In power production, we've financed something around 6 or 7 gigawatts of onshore wind. But we have done investments in manufacturing facilities. We financed a Siemens Gamesa facility in India years ago, and it did very well. And this is something that we're very positive, very bullish about. We can provide debt, we can provide equity, we can provide supplier financing. I mean, when we, as a bank, look at a financial opportunity, you're really trying to figure out, is this company well positioned? Do they know their market? Are they entering a sector that they understand and are going to be competitive in? And then we look at the mechanisms through which we can best support them. But all of those ingredients in Turkey are there. You've already got manufacturing. You're already very competitive in export markets. 75% of Turkey's onshore wind supply chain exports outside of Turkey, which is already fantastic. But I think a lot of this has to be, and the last thing I'll say is that a lot of this has to be rooted in a strong domestic market. Mm-hmm. You have to have demand in your current market, and that's kind of the foundation for your work. So the expansion into offshore wind is very promising. The target that Turkey now has of 5 gigawatts by 2035 is great, but that really has to be a foundation on which the supply chain is built, and using that as a springboard, you can then move into greater exports into the European and other markets. So,
thank you much for underlining the strength of Turkish onshore infrastructure and establishing the parallel strength and vision, how we can develop on the basis of this. And your institutions financing intentions and plans, because uh, I assume the offshore development program that you are coordinating with Turkish Ministry of Energy and also other authorities is the start of such development program. So the next hopefully will be after the initial tender or allocation of the initial slots, supporting local industry to evolve and enlarge their capabilities towards offshore. Yeah.
Exactly. It's those steps in the evolution are very important. Yeah.
Okay. Hopefully, in the next round, you can mention about the volume for these and similar other gentlemen about what kind of resources and how much we have. Then Ahmet Bey, size sorumu şöyle yöneltmek istiyorum. Tabii sanayi tarafı.
Mr. Ahmed, yeah, we talked about industry, global market. We had great answers to the questions, but there is this marine aspect to it. There is service, construction, installation side of it. It's not just limited to turbines. It's not about erecting some towers or turbines, but what about that? I mean, you would definitely need service, repair, maintenance needs throughout the life cycle of those turbines and towers. You, as far as I know, produce special marine vessels. I just followed your last year's order, and I think there are some ongoing productions. So thinking of the orders that you received in a couple of years, how do you read the global or the European demand? How do you foresee the future? And as a shipyard, how do you evolve your steps, your plans, your projections, and how do you contribute to the development of the future of Turkish shipyard? Let me step back a bit and remind you the Turkish marine history. Oh, no, 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 that would take forever. Okay, let's remember the last 15 years then. The shipyards were usually for commercial purposes like dry bulk, this and that, etc. But until 2010, that was the case. I mean, and then together with the crisis, people tended to look towards different markets, and then they recognized, oh, there's this offshore oil thing. Then we started to build ships to serve that purpose. But then, I mean, they were similar. Remember the 2015 oil crisis. After that crisis, offshore oil was severely challenged, and those ships working for that industry were like couldn't find any jobs to do. I mean, in a sense, and some of the existing ships were tried to be converted to be, used with wind, etc. So post 2020, offshore wind became, more active, and that's how we tried to position ourselves. But yeah, before that, this offshore oil, offshore wind, areas of use, and which vessels were using which one, actually had similar technologies already. Because, they are both floating. They try to extract oil, on a floating platform. Of course, they would be similar. Surely there were some nuances. For example, in offshore wind, you would need bigger jackups to, lift different components, maybe. But I mean, you would use similar ships for offshore wind as well. We had anchors, PSCs, we had offshore construction vessels built, and many others, both in Turkey and in many other countries. But then we tried to expand our efforts and try to evolve our efforts into wind, and then we received some contracts for ships. And we realized the potential there. So when it comes to floating offshores, then yeah, Mr. Giles also said about the same thing. The potential is huge, and can Turkey produce, manufacture components and everything? Yeah, sure. It's an untapped market. Not a lot of players around for now. You would need huge spaces. That's what we have. So floating platforms, yeah, we can do it. We've already ran some, studies. We try to join some tenders, and we try to come up with different and new things, actually. So, future, yes, there is a great future for Turkey. Last year, I was in a conversation with an offshore investor, and especially there are, companies who try to serve to the, construction of those platforms. And I heard that there is this intention to transform some of the existing fleets, and some of them are even reserved for the, decades to come. And looking at China, China appears to be interested in the construction of those vessels, and they are also interested in manufacturing vessels that will help the construction of those platforms. But how do you see it? Yeah, I mean, there is this thing, but then what about the operational aspect of it? When you think of floating structures, yeah, they float, but you have to keep them fixed somehow. Maybe you would need some anchorage, equipment. They have to, have special anchors so that you can fix them in the ground. You need a lot of special equipment and component. And yeah, once again, the potential for Turkey is huge. And by the way, Europe's capacity is limited, and they are concentrating on fixed components and everything, and they can only cover their needs, like barely. So our potential is huge, I believe. Thank you. Well, inshallah, God willing, in the coming years, we will see both onshore and offshore developments, not just for like turbines and towers, but for the marine aspect of it as well. So switching back to Giles now.
Is regarding the regulatory alignments, regulatory needs. As we all know, Wind Europe is very active in European regulatory landscape with its high-level communication with European authorities, European Parliament, European Commission. So given your focus on policy and market development as Wind Europe, what regulatory changes and alignments do you think are necessary to facilitate deeper integration between Turkey and Europe? So in Turkey, what do we need to enhance in terms of our regulation, and how Europe should respond to that?
Thank you very much, Ibrahim Bey. Ahmet Bey, really good to listen to you. We all know the history of your shipyards in Turkey, the Great Ottoman Navy, the Battle of Preveza, and so on. We learned about this at school. And one point I think between us we're not stressing enough yet is the crucial importance of ports.
Exactly.
Without strong port infrastructure, there is no offshore wind, period. Because all the equipment goes through ports. You need huge space for marshalling the equipment. The blades are over 100 meters long, and you lie them all down next to each other. You have to invest in space and land. You then need to invest in heavy loading quaysides that can bear weights of 30 tons per square meter. And most ports across Europe don't have that. You then need the deep berths for the jack-up vessels. Some countries elsewhere in Europe have not invested properly in their port infrastructure, and they are having to build their first offshore wind farms using ports in other countries. That's no good. You don't want to be in that position. Poland hasn't got its ports ready. It's great that they're building their offshore wind farms so quickly, but for their first projects, the equipment's going through Danish ports. As well as ports, shipyards are absolutely crucial. I think you've been rather modest, actually, here, Ahmet Bey. We need Turkish shipyard capability. We need more installation vessels, those huge jack-up vessels. We don't have enough of them in Europe for the big expansion of offshore wind. We need more service vessels. If you can manufacture these vessels in your shipyards, tell us about it. We want you. Back to your question about regulation, Ibrahim Bey. Key thing with offshore wind is your maritime spatial planning to begin with. You've got to identify the zones. They've got to be defined in legislation, and all the other users of sea space have got to buy into that. The shipping industry, the fishing industry, the military authorities, the biodiversity organizations. Everyone else who has a stake in the same space has to endorse those maritime spatial plans. Without that, you're just going to have conflict when you try to develop the wind farms later on.
Giles Bey'e teşekkür ediyorum. for your valuable comments. Both port infrastructure is crucial, as you highlighted, and without it, we would definitely be relying on other locations, other countries. While we are surrounded by 3 different seas, this shouldn't happen. And we have to take all necessary precautions and make preparations for that one. And maritime space planning definitely is one of the issues that we are chasing after and cooperating together with Ministry of Energy. And hopefully in the coming year and for the following years, 25 and 26, we all will see positive developments and potential locations to be announced, which will be developed. Ben tekrar Mahmut Bey'e biraz tabii işin liman tarafına da değinmek istersen.
Well, ports, yeah, super crucial for the industry. For example, let me remind you, Chandarlı Port and the green energy zone in Turkey. That has a very high significance and importance. Now, thinking of the competition with Europe or the production partnerships, there are some standards and there are some challenges or bottlenecks, but what is the latest in Turkey in terms of infrastructure? How would you comment? One of the unlucky details about wind is to, answer a question after Giles. I mean, what else is left to say? But then, one of the most important needs for expanding in onshore and offshore is to, of course, focus on ports, because your offshore efforts and your offshore development can feed and contribute to your, onshore developments will contribute to offshore developments as well. So with that idea, we contacted 2 reliable companies, and you supported us greatly. Thank you for that. So with Çamdarlı Port, I can tell you that now there is this financing model that is needed. The know-how is there, and we generated a project. We presented this to both the Ministry of Transport and Industry. And yeah, those 2 dear friends, Hamdi and Gökhan, they are here with us. Of course, we received incredible support from a lot of different players. Let me walk you through that project a bit. First, we'll focus on the existing onshore capacity. We'll come up with a structure to support the logistics aspect of it. And in time, we have a target of establishing a 2 million square meter facility. And then it'll be followed by focusing on offshore components right by the port, and the necessary installations will be carried out if necessary, but we'll focus on logistics. The financing need is above $200 million. Back then, Mr. Mustafa Varank was the minister, and he welcomed the project and asked whether we could overcome some other challenges. And I'm more than proud to say that thanks to the partnership of 3 big companies, we did so. And without any further financing need, we proved that we could realize the project. It's a bit slow progressing at the moment, but hasn't come to a halt because we need some decision-making processes to be completed. And I know that you'll continue to support us, and that's really valuable. And then, inshallah, we'll fully implement and realize the project. But then, unfortunately, yes, we set our goals. But by the way, I'm criticizing all of us now. It's not just criticism, but seeing the reality here. We set goals, but we failed to come up with solid roadmaps. Okay, 5,000 megawatts of offshore. Great target. Maybe it's a bit late to, talk about it in, December 2024, Focus on specific years. Never lose time. So my suggestion to all industry players, work on your roadmaps and come up with very solid ones, because it'll be directly linked with the success of, our endeavors. Have the necessary studies done and present them to the necessary ministries or authorities. Now, I was checking some figures and data, and something grabbed my attention. Europe's offshore production, and their 2 main countries, Spain and Portugal. Yeah? In Spain, there are just 2 offshore turbines, and Portugal has just 1. Or just the opposite. I can't remember now. But my point is, look, a country has one single active turbine, but they export many components to various countries. Remember Basque? They produce the towers, components, etc., and they have a port ready. Exactly. So production and manufacturing. Yeah. We have to focus more on this. And Chandarlı Port or similar other ports, by the way, it's not about us constructing it directly. It's about having solid ports, because they are, again, directly linked to the success of our offshore development. Thank you. Oh, by the way, Chandarlı, thank you so much for reminding us, because that's an incredible asset for the entire country. Yeah, just like Giles said, a country without a port can never develop itself in offshore, never ever. I think we all we learned the lesson, right? Maybe some of us learned it the hard way, but yeah, ports are indispensable. Don't we have any ports? Yeah, we do, but what about the infrastructure? Can it serve to the current needs, right? Because if you want to import, export, if you want to transfer components, you need some solid ports. Maybe the older turbines, would bring us to the conclusion that, okay, the existing port capabilities are enough. But no, turbines are getting larger, components are getting, bigger. Everything is getting bigger, so you need a very strong infrastructure if you want to succeed in this front. Chandarlı, yes, it's like a state project for the last 30 years, but the initial intentions were never the same. But it's a great thing that they focused on Çavdarlı anyways, because now it can be designed and expanded as a very well-equipped one. And yeah, by the way, the public was, expecting some competencies specific to that port. And that was really good. For example, Manisa Organized Industrial Zone, their needs and a potential project there, and to meet the needs, or, integrating and meeting the needs of other industrial zones. So you're talking about an integrated logistic hub, a center maybe, so that's the potential, right? And can we integrate it with the shipyard capabilities? Can you imagine? That facility can be expanded up to 5 million square meters. Like, yeah, that's a huge opportunity. So harbors, ports, production areas, shipyard capabilities, there could be a holistic approach there, and it could potentially serve to the entire wind industry of the Aegean region. I'm going to switch to English now because I'm curious about the roadmap that you just mentioned.
Mahmut Bey, and while switching to Sean, uh, because Mahmut Bey mentioned about the need for a detailed detailed roadmap to realize the targets of the vision, 2035 vision, announced by the Ministry of Energy, which included 5 gigawatts of offshore completion until 2035. And as rightfully he mentions, that we need a detailed roadmap until then. Not only a target, a specific target, which is good, but we need steps. 2028 could be the infrastructure development, completion of that, or spatial planning, completion with another target date, etc. So we are in discussions with World Bank and also with one of the institutions under Ministry of Energy called TENMAC to collaborate for the development of such a plan with the participation of the sector. Interested parties, TÜREP, TENMAC, with the same target, and definitely it should be in collaboration with IFC and World Bank under their existing long-term the offshore development plan. From that point, I'm taking it from that point, I want to ask you about the Turkish government stance. How do you think Turkish government and Turkish companies can enhance the bankability and attract more international investments for offshore wind investments and supply chain? Because this is multi-stakeholder issue. So how do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ibrahim Bey. For those of us that have been in the wind industry a long time, and I think I've been in it for 30 some odd years, working in onshore wind, an onshore wind project is relatively speaking a fairly simple thing. The complexity from a financial standpoint is, you've got you'll have a full wrap EPC where you've got the turbine and the balance of plant and everything else that's kind of wrapped up together. The financing is maybe, I don't know, 80 million, 100 million, maybe 200 million. You'll have maybe 2 or 3 different lenders, maybe just one. From a financing standpoint, it's a pretty easy thing to deal with. Then you look at offshore wind, and it's completely different.
Yeah, exactly.
You're looking at a capex in the area of $2 to $3 billion. You're looking at 14 or 15 different lenders. You're looking at 7 to 8 contract work packages that have no back-to-back guarantees. The risk is the risk profile of an offshore wind farm from a banker's standpoint
enormous. Yeah.
Is huge. It's more like an oil and gas project, frankly.
Exactly.
So when you're looking, if you put yourself into a banker's shoes and you're looking at bankability, the main thing that you're trying to deal with is risk and uncertainty. And you look at, I'm an engineer working in a bank, and the ability of a banker to find risk is really remarkable. And so you've got to try to reduce that risk in as many places as possible. And so to answer your question in terms of the bankability of suppliers, you do not want any surprises in your suppliers. You want to be able to look through your list of suppliers and say, I know them, I know them, I know them. I don't know these folks, but they've got a great, they've got a great history. You're going through this checklist. And so I'd say that the fundamental element of bankability for a company involved in the supply chain, or if they're a developer, is like know your business and reduce your risk as much as you can. And a lot of that comes down to forming international partnerships with people that know their work. From a developer standpoint, that's a matter of having an international developer who understands the complexities of offshore wind, but can marry it with the local knowledge. We work in places like the Philippines and Vietnam, Colombia, Brazil, Sri Lanka. When you're an international developer and you're going into these places, you want to ally yourselves with a local partner. And in Turkey, that's certainly the case because you have an incredibly developed, local network of folks that know the market. So you want to have that combination. From a supply chain standpoint, it's the same thing. If you have a castings manufacturer, you want them to be able to have international references. If you have a blade manufacturer, you need them to go through all the supplier qualifications. And they check all these boxes, and at the end of the day, you've got this massive project with a bunch of lenders and a bunch of bankers sitting at the end trying to find a weak link in the chain, and you do not want them to find a weak link. And the easiest way of doing that is to make sure that all of the developers, suppliers, tier 1, 2, and 3, that they know their business, because it's easy to make a bank nervous, and if a bank is nervous, your cost of capital goes up. So yeah.
Which we don't prefer.
No, you do not want to, because, and this is one of the big secrets of the offshore wind industry, and Giles can talk about this in Europe. One of the magic formulas has been the lowering of the weighted average cost of capital. Because you have improvements in your supply chain and in your delivery, but the impact that your cost of capital has on your cost of LCOE is huge. And so anything you can do to mitigate risk, decrease uncertainty, is going to lower your cost of capital, and that's one of your biggest levers to getting an affordable LCOE.
Thank you for highlighting the differences between onshore and offshore in terms of risk profile, and also its reflections in the cost of capital, LCOE. As you mentioned, I mean, in onshore, we are talking about a completely different cost structure. I don't want to simplify it that much, but kind of a LIGO, which constitutes 70% more or less of the cost, while we have like 30% of the cost remaining on CBOP and EBOP, but completely the other way around, approximately 70% on non-turbine costs, which definitely is quite important to design well, so that we don't make the bankers anxious and concerned about how the project is going to be completed, or whether it's going to be completed successfully in time, in budget, which is key. Switching to the which is going to take the most out of it, as it's obvious. Ahmet Bey'e şunu
I would like to ask Mr. Ahmet. Of course, we see that 70% of the job belongs to you. You have to do it, 70%. Turbine makers only end up with the 30% of the job. Of course, joking aside, especially there are some special components, special equipments. Even the cables has to be insulated, specially. So it will be costing 10 times of the normal cable. Especially, you have to use DC cables on the offshore part. You have to insulate those cables, extra DC cables with the platforms on the offshore platforms. You have to install control centers. You have to install generators. Well, you will be needing special protection standards, though the cost will be even higher. Logistically and from the construction side, there are some specifications, and the cost is going higher. So do you need a technology transfer? We believe that we need a technology transfer. We always discuss it. Well, for the shipyard construction industry, how can they develop themselves? How can they transfer the technology? What do we need to complete our competences? What do we need? Are there any special collaborations that you are completing? Can you please talk about this? Thank you so much. The know-how transfer is one of the most important part of this issue. As we mentioned, in 2008, we were producing these normal vessels. Then we started these offshore vessels, more specified vessels. It didn't happen overnight. Of course, a lot of European collaborators supported us. They helped us with the design. We received some services. This know-how has developed, and they transmitted the know-how. And of course, when we construct the new vessels, we always receive this support starting from the design to the top. And the same is it goes with the floating offshore. Those developers, those designers are always the design companies, and there are some other companies related with these design companies. These institutions are developing these concepts. That's for sure. Their know-how is invaluable. We are shipyard construction workers. I cannot, I cannot assess their needs. I cannot assess the specifications. Of course, they are more focused on the winds. They don't know the complications of the sea, offshore. So, uh, how they don't know how to do the industrialization. They don't know how to do the mass production. They always want to receive some support for the industrialization, mass production. They don't need us. They are developing the concepts, they are making a rough estimation of the costs. But in order for them to facilitate the mass production, industrialize, they need our support. So it is a collaboration. It needs a collaboration. So I believe that in the industrialization part, as we mentioned in the beginning, we have to design the mass production. In Europe, it has a limited capacity. Maybe they don't even have the capacity as they mentioned. They don't really have a floating platform construction as 100 meters to 100 meters. It is a 10-story building, 10 acres. We're talking about these huge structures. Unbelievable. So imagine mass producing 60 of them. They don't have enough spaces. You need an additional space aside from the shipyard construction side. So these topics are really complicated topics. You have to carefully elaborate these topics. As Turkey, we have some endeavors to find solutions. Of course, I hope that we will be seeing these concrete solutions and we will be taking the next steps. Well, thank you so much. Of course, we have these efforts, we have these endeavors, and the public institutions are ready to support. Technology Ministry, Industry Ministry, General Director of Industry, Ministry of Industry are watching closely. They have these directorates. The directorates is the shipyard, directorate of the shipyard. So for industrial development of Turkey, it is very important, and Ministry of Industry is following this topic closely, and Energy Matters General Directorate and Energy Efficiency Department is closely watching us with a lot of interest, and they will be watching even closer.
Let's speak about these. All right.
Thank you, Ibrahim Bey. I just want to add something quickly to what Mahmoud Bey said. Indeed, Spain and Portugal have very strong offshore wind supply chains. They focus on the foundations, yeah, and they are exporting them to the rest of Europe. The turbines per se. The blades, nacelles, towers for offshore wind farms are manufactured mostly in Germany, Denmark, UK, France. Now Poland is joining that group, and Vestas yesterday opened a new offshore blade factory in Taranto, not so far away from Turkey, of course. And then when it comes to the cables, there's the excellent Hellenic cable factory in Corinth, which they're now expanding. Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you for the contribution. Today, we are completing. I'll help you catch up the plate. Bugün gerçekten alanında çok üst düzey ve
Today there are some experts. We had these valuable guests, Giles Dixon,
Sean Whitaker, IFC'den Head of Offshore Wind Program, Ahmet Bey Tersan,
Mr. Ahmet Tersan Shipyard, and Mr. Mahmoud Ateş Wind Power's Vice Chairman. These are the leading figures of this sector. We wanted to touch every part and dimension of the sector, what we need for the future, and how do we do this study as well as benchmark.
have to accomplish in the coming period. Thank you very much for your contributions. Thank you for listening and being with us. So have a good day. Have a good Congress.
Evet.
Giles.
Grep Başkanımıza değerli yönetim için
We would like to thank for the moderations. Thank you so much for giving us power. Thank you. Giles has to depart. So, first of all, I believe that you will be presenting the details. So we have these valuable works of Selma Öztürk, President of TÜREP, will be presenting. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your contributions. Esteemed Mahmut Güldoğan, thank you so much for your valuable contributions. Thank you. Shipyard, Tersan Shipyard CEO, Ahmet Paksu, thank you so much for your contributions. Thank you. We would like to
Whittaker, Deniz Üstü
contributing
Rüzgar
and
Başkanı
participating.
Uluslararası Finans Kurumu'ndan
I hope you
ona da
like and
değerli
enjoy.
katkıları için çok
thank you so much for your invaluable contributions. Well, we completed the session. After 50 minutes, we will be continuing with our fourth session. Let's take a family picture, group picture. Could you please kindly invite you, Mr. Ahmet Aksu? Did they depart? Yes, they departed. They had a plane to catch. Thank you so much. We will be continuing with the next session within 50 minutes.
of this session. Evet, bu bölümü noktaladık.
Well, we concluded this session. The supply chain, and we discussed Turkey's integration to supply chain to the offshore industry. We will be continuing with the fourth session of today. Of course, today we will continue with the theme accelerating onshore wind development, navigating the new regulatory landscape. We would like to thank our moderators and speakers once again. See you at 2 o'clock after 50 minutes in this hall. See you.